And I'm really excited to be here today and chat with you all about road mapping and discussing serverless best practices. So let me share my screen. Some materials prepared for us. Fantastic, seems to be working. Perfect. Yeah, I'm really excited here to be talking to you about road mapping serverless best practices. Prepared for myself and behalf of my company, Serverless Guru. And so who am I? AJ did a great job already. I am the VP of Operations for Serverless Guru, co-host of Talking Serverless, Serverless Economics podcast, always trying to think and collaborate with others around best ways just to engage and enrich the serverless community. I'm coordinating all internal and client-facing resources for Serverless Guru. So if something's going on, I know about it. Yep, that has yet to not be the case. So if something's going on, I know about it. And that sort of thing. I'm also thankfully and very honored to be named AWS Community Builder recently, and be part of that whole group of people. And have our Slack channel, and it's really fascinating. Just all the amazing things that you get to do in the serverless world, and the great people you get to meet. And some could even say, most importantly, I'm also a bird dad. So I've gotten to spend a lot of time with this pigeon of mine. It'll be relevant later in the conversation too. I come from a big Italian family, and so of course I named him Giovanni Pepperoni, or G's for short. Whatever it takes in order to maintain your mental health through the pandemic. And I'd say, when you spend so much time in the cloud, you start to see birds and things a little bit differently. Um, and a little bit about who is Serverless Guru, the company that I'm working for. We help companies on every step of the serverless journey. A lot of the times, we are developing serverless apps with different teams. We're helping them create initiatives to migrate applications to serverless, and we are training teams on serverless and cloud. Really, whatever step these companies and clients come to us, we're helping them just sort of usher them through it and guide them through the process and find the solution that's right for them. And so I'm excited to talk with you a little bit about serverless best practices. And something that I'll also preface is, as VP of operations, I understand and get to know a lot about what's going on throughout the entire organization. Am I always the individual on the front lines learning about what's going on? Not always, but I check in with our team members a lot. So I would not have been able to make, I think, as quality of a presentation if it wasn't for our international team. So I want to shout out to them and really thank you a lot, because you make all the things we do serverlessly possible. So number one, I have a couple keystones for us of best practices, and that is invoke services directly, or at least invoke your AWS services whenever possible. Overall, you're going to see this is going to reduce the complexity. If something is simpler, there's less points of failure. That is good. You're going to be reducing your costs when it comes to not having to pay for those Lambda functions, and you get to conserve your Lambda quotas, your various Lambda quotas. So what this can mean in practice is, lean into utilizing API Gateway and AWS AppSync. An example from our team is, instead of having a Lambda function, you can use a mapping template for API Gateway and AppSync to route directly to your other AWS services. So no management of any application code, no cost for turning on a Lambda function. And although there may be some, I would say, marginal effort up front of just learning about these intricacies of these services, how to call them directly, is going to really pay off in the future. That's more code that you do not have to worry about. You don't have to manage. If you can invoke services directly, look into it. All right, keystone number 2: stay dry. See, AJ's got the right idea. I wish I had a glass of water myself. Dry. Don't repeat yourself if possible. This can look in a couple different ways. Utilize step functions to repeat generic solutions, general business logic that's going on. Standardize stacks for deployment across multiple environments. And really, this is a huge one. I see this one overlooked a lot of the time, a lot, when people are coming to serverless or they're trying to figure out solutions, and figure out best practices. Is really establish consistent conventions for your environment labels. Do like dev, test, prod, and then using a CI/CD pipeline to handle these deployments and testing. You're going to reduce your human mistakes. it's been surprising to me the number of times I'll mention this to people about having these different environments, and they're like, "Oh, like you mean I can not just have prod as my single environment?" And I have to say, like, yes, it doesn't have to be this difficult. Let's utilize the CI/CD. Let's create some different environments for you, and then by the time that you're going into production, everything has been tested. You know, nothing is going to break. It's been tested over AWS, not in your local environment. So you're just ready to serve your customers, and that's a perfect place to be. And bada bing, I would say Keystone 3. Another key one is keep logging and observability in mind. Uh, a lot of the times when I'm working with clients, I see it's something, especially when just building out a POC, there may not be as much thought up front in long-term observability solutions or long-term use cases with observability. At a base level, I'm recommending using CloudWatch log insights to so you can query over all of your console logs and across your AWS services. Um, and a lot of the times that can be sufficient, but overall, in my opinion, I think it depends on the volume of what you're working with as well as the complexity of your executions. um, if you're having to do like, if you're for some reason scraping like 100,000 to a million like reviews online a day, and you need that to be happening from day one, um, then you may want you may want a more complex monitoring solution, especially if that I was talking to a person from our team, and um, in the past they had this experience where they had a series of step functions doing these scraping routines, and it would run at night from like midnight to 6 a.m., and it got stuck in a loop, and they ended up over the weekend racking up like an extra $10,000 bill just because of this loop. And so this was it was a human problem. There was something there, and no one was sort of around. We want to move away from having to carry the pager with us all the time. And you can, if they had alerts, some sort of alerting system set up, um, then potentially they would have been able to catch that problem before it ballooned up into a very large bill. And there's many great observability solutions. I love Serverless Pro. That's probably what our team is using a lot most of the time. But then there's sort of other large ones in the industry, like a New Relic, a Datadog, a Lamigo, or a Thundra. Some have their own little extra flavors that they like to have, but there's many things to choose from, and for me, like Serverless Pro pretty much fixes most of my major use cases. And then I also wanted to share a little client success story that we had recently about you know encapsulating and utilizing these serverless best practices. And so, context, we had a client, 20 over 10. They're a leading digital marketing platform for financial advisors. Then they were already pretty familiar with serverless. So they already had, they were using serverless framework, but they really weren't hitting their goals specifically. They were talking about, we have slow deployments. Their stacks were deeply, deeply nested, spaghetti-ish, I would even say. And there's performance issues. And after sort of doing a initial reviews consultation, we saw that there were distinct opportunities just to improve their development workflow, reduce their operational complexity, really just accelerate their entire development process, and improve their Lambda performances. Those are the key considerations that were really painting them. And then first solution was really untangle these nested stacks. No spaghetti code. I may be Italian, but the only spaghetti I like is on my dinner plate. I don't like it in my code base. I'm sorry. And so I think this is one of the most common things that we see is these highly entangled stacks that we eventually have to decouple. And that's pretty much the big one that was like the first area that we tackled. um, and just like creating the additional stacks is really just like overall simpler. It's simpler to understand what you're working with, and it creates a better long-term solution for managing your IAC. So in this case, we established a set of IAC principles across multiple resources. Um, And this immediately, once we did this, the team was able to say, it was like, Ryan, Josh, Serverless Guru team, you just improved our entire process, our development process. Like, we can share this code base to the entire team and everyone knows what's going on now. And that wasn't the case before. And that was just an incredible, huge win for us. And it definitely did take some time up front, just to invest in the resource isolation. And there were before problems running into where they would have their lambdas and database IAC mixed together, and it was becoming very, very problematic for them to make changes swiftly. And ultimately, we kind of had to bite the bullet a bit and then rip things apart. And it worked out. And that is usually the case in every instance where we do have to do that. And then we also were decoupling their service structure, isolating the services into separate stacks, and reducing the deployment time. So that really goes along the same thing, the same principle of decoupling. Solution two, which we were able to provide for them, and something we recommend to a lot of clients, is limit the usage of your third-party dependencies, and that although there may be plugins and libraries for certain solutions, every megabyte is counting. Every single bit that you are passing can contribute to increased deployments or just a less optimal system. And if you can build something natively without a third party library, we recommend that you really should. Um, in this case, however, there was an edge where there was a number of things that we had to remove, but there were some that we found actually were they either what was it? They justified their own existence and they just needed to be optimized. This specifically was utilizing Serverless Webpack plugin. Um, excuse me. And so, this is one of the big things that I talk about in general of when people are coming to me and they're talking about, your serverless guru. Does that mean you only use serverless framework? And in most cases, I would say yes, and I do it not because I'm a serverless zealot, but because I think it's a very good tool. And one of the most I think key points about it is having having the serverless plugin integrations. You're able to do things like utilize this serverless Webpack plugin, which was at first, even for me, I think it was a little not it wasn't as intuitive of how this would actually work, because way back in the day I was creating like working with a lot of PHP and WordPress, and it was like minimize everything, uglify everything. But in this scenario where you're by doing that, especially in this use case, you're actually creating operational and human issues, even though maybe for the machine in certain instances it could be better, which wasn't the case. Because now it was readable, everyone could see what was going on and understand it. You didn't need either the person who made it to lead the project, and you could pass it off to someone who was joining the team. And disabling the minification up front really reduced the amount of CPU and memory usage that was needed to do these initial deployments, which was one of the key concerns that they were coming to us. This client 20/10 came to us and says these deployments are taking too long. And a lot of the times, if a client or someone who's coming to us and is complaining about these deployments taking too long, then they're also pretty close to just dropping serverless completely. And so that's like a key issue. If you're able to solve that, then as a consultant, if you're able to solve that issue, then I think the world of possibilities start to open up. And this was really the case for us in utilizing this plugin. And then one thing also that we did was we decided to package things individually. And this was to help prevent issues of cold starts. There was a couple other things that we suggested that they could have done, but it wasn't it wasn't essential for us in that exact engagement. But it's just like I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I'll have to get back to that. And so this is really the fun part, because For me, I come from a background of entrepreneurship, both in like social services industry and chemicals. So I love getting business results. I love solving problems and challenges, and so gritting through all of the technical problems, sometimes you really get these success stories, which make me really happy, regardless of the size. When the client is able to, have a big win, it makes me happy. So we were able to reduce the size of their deployments by half. They were completely blown away, and it was like, wow, everything works so much better. It's way more feasible. There was some cost reduction. And they were able to really launch this sort of secret project of theirs into the public, and they received a lot of good feedback. And what does it mean to receive good feedback? Well, not only were their clients and their customers and existing customer base really happy, sort of the industry they're in, they were recognized and nominated for 3 industry rewards in the wealth management space. And so I think that's really an interesting testament to be able to iterate so quickly and create these improvements in the workflow in order to really please your end user. And to me, that's like one of the most powerful parts of serverless is a democracy. So in a way, I'd say democratizing the expertise it takes in order to release production ready applications. Boom. And that's sort of my talk in a nutshell. I'm definitely around and excited to do some Q&A and that sort of thing. But if you like this and are interested in learning more about Serverless Guru, maybe getting a second pair of eyes, just sort of to look over your serverless problems, check us out at serverlessguru.com. These are also our handles for our social media platforms. We're big on Twitter, like everyone in the serverless spaces, I'd say. So Talking SLS, Talking Serverless podcast, Talk Out Serverless Economics, and then my personal handle is Serverless Josh. I need some more followers. I made as a community builder now. I'm like a personality now, so I have to raise my followers. If I can hit over 25, then I will have a celebration.
Thanks, Josh. That's great. I have a couple of questions that I've taken some notes on. I want to ask you, kind of bounce off you, but I wanted to check if the group had anything they wanted to jump in on. Otherwise, I'll pick your brain a little bit. So
Sure.
if anyone, Jerry, Jonathan, Kevin, Phil, Wayne, I know Ryan Jones is here in the room. He also co-founder or founder of Serverless Guru, co-worker of Josh. So I don't if you have a question for Josh, I'm sure you could ask it, but
Yeah, I'm sure Ryan
all
could
right.
ask the hardest questions. So
Well, oh, here we go. We got one from Jonathan. Do you see that in chat, Josh, or do you want me? I can read it for you.
Let's see. Seeing looking forward to 2021. What serverless needs and challenges do you think our clients will have? So clients of Serverless Guru. Wow, that's really interesting. Because I think there's a
That's a
difference
good
between.
question.
Yeah, that's really good because I think there's like a version of like what problems do I think they will have versus what problems I think they should be having. Um, and so I think we will still see uh, clients coming to us of sort of like really early adopters, people wanting to optimize their deployments, wanting to optimize their serverless systems, uh, getting us to maybe help them architect out new solutions. And I think what I'm really hoping and wanting to see is I'm wanting to see more organizations come to us, larger organizations, enterprises start coming to us and really thinking about the next 5, 7, 10 years in the future, and thinking about we want to create a new greenfield service offering. How can we do this and test it in a way that is going to really serve our customers, and coming to us to where we're going to have to help them architect out those solutions, as well as provide the foundational instruction, best practices in order for them to scale internally, because that's always one of our goals. The Serverless Guru is empowerment, is enterprise empowerment. We want to empower the teams in the organizations themselves to one day just not sort of need us. And I think that's we really cut ourselves out a hard goal with the pandemic and everything, because it's if your whole thing or a key part of your organization is now running serverless, and you're having to meet a whole new class of needs, and you do need, and then I think it behooves you to invest in expertise. So hopefully that answers your question, Jonathan.
Cool. I'll jump in with one of
Yeah.
mine, Josh.
Hmm.
You had mentioned nested stacks and sort of untangling that mess. And as somebody who is intimately familiar with that, there's some trade-offs there. So you talked a little bit about like a mono repo, but could you touch on a mono lambda and maybe some things to consider with like, the simple, maybe like the worst or dumbest way I could phrase this question would be like, how many routes belong in a service, right? But like another way to look at it is like is the right level of granularity one function per route, or is it one function per service, or somewhere in between? And what is your opinion on that? And what have you experienced? And what have you seen?
Gosh, I think, that's also a very, very good question. And I think, I'll even want to try and tie it back to one of the first points, which is like, is the minimum best, is it one function per service? Like if you can do no function per service and just invoke things directly, then you should do that. I'm always a big fan of lowering complexity as possible. I've listened to a lot of talks around just sort of chaos engineering. I talk to some people in the space a lot and just like to nerd out on that. And so if I can reduce the amount of things that can go wrong or else be able to monitor them very closely, then I will then I'll sort of lean towards that. And I think there's interesting times where you sort of want to say that one lambda per service or one lambda per stack maybe is the right way, but then I see people who do that, but they're shoving like so much memory inside of a lambda function, and that also isn't something that you want. So I think if you're able to I always try to think like, what is the end goal, what's the end in mind, um, and optimizing for that use case. Monolithic lambda, it depends. If it's smaller, it's faster for small teams, maybe trying to create a POC quickly. Though if it is decoupled, then you're getting it and then I'd say, and I've seen it a lot, it's faster for larger teams, and then there's less impact with issues. So if you can strike that balance, I'll give both ends of that spectrum and sort of iterate from there.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good perspective, considering all of the complexities that go into that sort of decision. Um, Anyone else have thoughts on that or questions on that, or questions for Josh? Here we go. We got another one.
Oh, sure, sure. Okay, Jonathan. TLDR for what chaos engineering is. I would say, very simple, and I think this is how I would explain it, sort of like chaos engineering for everyday life. I would say it is how does your system handle extra complexity, or how does it handle complexity it's not expecting? I think there's also great books like what is it? Nassim Taleb has that book Black Swan, and I think and Anti-Fragile. Those two are huge ones that I think sort of help guide many different things I do, and it's very applicable to serverless as well. And so in chaos engineering, there's time where you just will inject wrong things into your system, and you'll see like what happens, like what breaks when there is randomness, when if something decides to go wrong. And then based on what goes wrong, maybe especially in like large systems with high levels of complexity, and this is when you're having those maybe like a million executions an hour or something, because sometimes you do have those workloads. What is breaking, and then by seeing what breaks it, obviously you're not doing this in prod, you're doing this in like a test environment, or someplace, or like someplace else, an isolated system. And from what breaks, you then use that as sort of your first round of either what I would say to fix it, but a further level of investigation of like, how do we improve this aspect of our application, or aspect of our process. And I'm trying to remember, I think there's like another end of that spectrum of sort of like I don't know, like QA or sort of testing. I'm trying to remember what the other end of that spectrum is. I don't know if anyone else remembers. They can add that there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting comment you brought up, especially with your client you had talked about earlier, having sort of deployed an infinite loop to production. We found a couple of cases at Serverless Inc. where our own services were negatively impacted from a noisy neighbor problem, like early on when we were rolling this out, where like one client basically deployed like an infinite loop and sort of just like left for the weekend. And we were like trying to, we were detecting it on our end because we have like various detection for abnormal number of events for a certain, customer or whatever. And I think that's actually a very common thing. My last job before I started working at Serverless Inc., I had deployed an infinite loop to a Lambda function that was based on, a REST API, eventually terminating in an SNS publish, which
Mhm.
of course, like some other system would then consume that publish and do something else that eventually emitted an event and eventually call that API. So it's a lot more common than you would think. I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
the circuit breaker pattern is important for serverless, especially because it's like bill per use. So
I was going to ask kind of a similar question if I could jump in real quick, just to piggyback off of what AJ said.
Mhm.
I've run into a couple situations, especially in folks like first use of kind of a serverless mindset, where that'll happen maybe a little bit more frequently. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the circuit breaker pattern, and then also like um, what tools you have for, particularly in terms of like observability in terms of budgeting. Maybe those dovetail in a particular way too.
Sure, sure. I know we have one of the things I love about Serverless Guru is that we have a repository of patterns that we make accessible just to people in the community, people in the space, and that list is always changing. I'm interested if we have a circuit breaker pattern. I am unsure. I haven't personally built one, and I'm sure if we have one, but that could be something if we do not have, then we can potentially add one in and then sort of share that out because it is something that I'm sure we have sort of had to create. I would say as far as observability, like there are different like alert thresholds that you can set depending on the tool that you're using, in that sort of way. And so that's like the first step that I would recommend is if you're experiencing like either increased usage or or hitting a certain dollar amount, just get that alert to pop up. I know we have like some internal ones for internal resources, and I definitely see those, and then it's like, okay, time to why is this whole stack here? And it's like, oh, that was for a demo that we forgot to tear down. It's like, please tear down soon. Um, and it's super helpful because if I didn't see that by the end of the month, we'd be paying for a bunch of client resources that we wouldn't get reimbursed for.
Right. Awesome.
Yes.
Wayne has a question. I don't know, Josh, if you could do me just a real big favor and read it as you answer it, just for the
Yes.
sake of the recording. Thank you. I know you've done a great job of that so far.
Fantastic. So, Wayne is asking, now that Lambda supports containers, should a team start with containers or a roadmap into their future plans? I think my opinion is still to, like, even though it does support containers, my opinion would still be to start without the containers. Just because from what I've seen, if you already have a team of people who are fairly competent developers and maybe they're not already specialized and like doing containers every single day, um, then I think it's a more optimal choice just to start with more of a serverless solution, build out a POC, and then if you need to put those on containers later, you certainly have that option. um, but if it's a way to sort of like bridge the gap, then I think it's a good first step. Like if you're doing everything on containers and you want to start trying out some things more on the some more things related to Lambda, and that's like a perfectly fine option. Though I don't know. I always I reading a bunch more about sort of like the eternal like the what is it? There's two wolves inside my heart. One of them is Kubernetes, and the other is AWS Lambda. And so however that story goes, and I think it's easier for the average person to start working with different serverless services rather than just jumping into containers in all their shapes and forms. So that's my long-winded answer to your question.
That's a pretty good answer. If I could, if you don't mind, add a
Please,
little bit of
please.
color to that. I'm not I don't work for AWS. I work for a company that consumes AWS resources and tries to make them easier for people to understand. And one of the things we've noticed from our own investigation and confirming it with the team is just like the Lambda support for containers doesn't actually use the container to run the code. It just uses it as a packaging mechanism. So the entire goal of that effort from Lambda and the AWS team was to allow people that already have CI/CD and kind of workflows to package applications in a Docker image or a Docker container to allow them to deploy that into a Lambda environment. So if you're experiencing a situation that you're limited by the Lambda packaging via zip file, I think the Docker image is a great way to extend that. So like Docker, for example, Docker on Lambda gives you a 10 gigabyte image size, which is huge. Previously to this, we were limited to 250 megabytes without layers. So the advice from the prevailing, serverless Lambda folks were like, put your data into a layer, and then once you exceed the layer limit, which is I think another 250 gigabytes or 250 megabytes, you'll start to want to put your stuff in S3 or like read it, and then you're paying to read your data every time you invoke it, which sucks, frankly. So instead, if you're on a machine learning sort of use case, or if you're in a big data use case, or if you're a giant enterprise with, whatever, you have 3 or 4 gigabytes worth of dependencies for any reason, you may explore containers as a good starting point. If you don't have those, I wouldn't necessarily pick that up. I want to also divorce myself from my employer here. Like I do work for Serverless Sync and the Serverless Framework every day, but whatever the stats Andy Jassy pointed out in his keynote, we're at like 3% of all enterprises are using cloud at all right now today. So like there's plenty of room to compete against SAM or, uploading your own image to Lambda or whatever. So whatever works for you, use it. Definitely. I don't, if Docker containers on Lambda are the right use case for you and your organization to adopt serverless, do it. I don't want to discourage you, but it's not markedly different than what is currently available today, unless you're starting to push the boundaries of that file system or data size, because that is the one huge differentiating factor that I've found in my research so far. So it's amazing if you have an ML use case or some sort of other AI use case where you don't pay to load that data all of a sudden. It's awesome. That's great. You don't have that. That's not available to you. And all the other ways you could do that previously with Lambda, you pay for, which is sort of, I don't know, it's like getting just punched in the ribs by Bezos, right? Like why, like I'm already paying you to invoke the data every time. Like why am I paying you to load it? So it's a great solution there. But otherwise I would say stick with whatever other tool, SAM, serverless framework, Pulumi or Plumi, whatever you want to pick, do it. But that's really the only difference. You're not going to be able to like deploy Elasticsearch onto Lambda just because it supports Docker now, I guess is my point.
No, that's good. Thanks for adding the color, AJ. I think that definitely helps put things into perspective a bit too.
Questions, Phil, Kevin, Jerry, anyone else? Jerry's got one.
Okay. What have you found as good resources to reference to help architect with serverless? Oh, that's really good. That's a really good question. Let me see. I'm trying to think. Probably the best resources that I have found is really the people that have worked at Serverless Guru. Those are sort of my go-to resource because we are always we just sort of like an internal team of knowledge. And so one thing I would recommend is like take a look at like the Serverless Guru blog. We have a training course on Zero to Paid Professional on developing with serverless and thinking about services, and also Serverless Stack. I think serverlessstack.com is also like a really good solid resource. I think it's before we had a lot of internal training resources, that's where we would point people to. And there's definitely resources around AWS and AWS's site. I think you can rely on that, and especially if you have like something cloud specific, then go to that. And if this is specifically with for with serverless with a big S, if this is specifically serverless framework, definitely check out like serverless.com, and we have lots of resources on the Serverless Guru blog, and our training course. We cover a lot of different interesting use cases for serverless. Oh, thank you, Ryan, for some of these links. Bada bing.
Ryan and everyone else, like, feel free to chime in here. We're at the point of the meeting where we just want to have an open conversation about serverless and how we're all sort of, it's an emerging technology. So we want to talk about how we're learning about it, how we're discussing it, what we're learning from our friends and our cohorts and companies we contract with. Ryan's mic unmuted for a second and then remuted, but yeah. All right, well, okay, I do have one more question for you. Sure. So one thing I think is that Serverless Guru has a great answer on, that is an awesome perspective and just dying to hear. Like, a lot of times, you know, you've talked about this in your talk, and you get brought in when there's been some adoption of serverless in general, like little s serverless. You know, we've tried it, we like it. A developer, you know, somebody on the team, somebody in a technical capacity is like, I'd never want to manage another server. I want to just upload my code and run it. But you must have gotten brought in when there's a lot of friction, where there's some either status quo or opinions or some sort of, you know, opposition. And I'm sure the questions we've gotten have gone from, you know, normal to deranged. And I'm just curious to get your opinion on it. What friction have you overcome as you're working with your clients? You know, what are some of the biggest serverless myths you've helped dispel? And how do you help your clients overcome internal friction to adopting new technology?
Completely. I'll give an answer, and then I hope Ryan chimes in a bit, because he's been doing this even longer than I have, and so I'm sure he's seen even more of a gambit. But you know, I think definitely answer regardless of the problem. I think I see the team overcome them in sort of the same way, which is, you know, really being excellent communicators and being able to reframe the technology as sort of a means to an end. In order to reach a larger goal. I think it's one thing I've learned, and I think we see, and we also feel, those of us who are developers and like working in the code, you know, you become married to the process of making the code. It's an artistic expression as much as it is, a technical demonstration of aptitude, I would say. You know, it's like, you know, both of those things married together. And so when you're talking to these, these directors, these people leading these organizations, these technology decisions, how can one not imagine that they are really tied up in the solutions that they think are the best? We must use AWS SAM. We must use containers. Serverless is, you know, gosh, just like, you know, serverless doesn't work, or serverless fails because I just don't want to use Amazon. I'm just going to only use Google Cloud Functions for my one specific use case. And because that didn't work for me once, I can never use serverless again. You know, and I think, you know, really reframing and finding ways to open people's mind to, this worked for someone else. This is what it's capable of, and being able to show clear examples, being able to reframe, like, this is your goal, right? Well, let's help you get there. And ultimately just trying to be as for the client as possible, because if you're already having that discussion with them, I think that's a really good spot, because that means you have that trust. And one thing I always tell my team is that, you know, what we're doing a lot of the times is we're establishing a trust journey, and we need to make sure that we have this relationship with the client, with the teams that we're working with, and we have their best interests at heart. So I think leading with those feet forward, we've been able to overcome some pretty intense challenges. So that's sort of my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes,
this
is
Ryan.
Great, yeah.
Oh, cool, great. Yeah, so that was a good answer from Josh. I think one area that I've seen is sometimes around costs. Like, I know initially it was like serverless costs more than what we're doing, and there's always been this like, you know, itch that I've had, like, since I've started doing serverless back in like late 2017 and interacting with people, and it's like people don't ever see the hidden cost factor, where, you know, you might be investing hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars into engineers, project managers, technical support, people that are on call on the weekend in case a fire drill happens because the database doesn't scale automatically. And there's hundreds of different cost factors that are happening in downstream meetings where there's 40 people on a production call. It should be easy, but it's not. And a lot of that stuff, I feel like serverless at first, it was like, Lambda functions. Now it's like fully managed services, and kind of anything that you can do where you have that overhead and you can kind of hand off the responsibility to the cloud provider, and then you can get out of the business of making sure that you're right sizing the capacity on servers and all that stuff yourself. I feel like that's been a really big thing. And so I think, sometimes we've seen pushback from clients and from people around certain things that it's one of those things where it's like, how does my job shift? And I actually gave a talk back in, or maybe like early 2019, where I was at New Relic and I got introduced and it was like, Ryan Jones is going to give a talk about serverless. And it was like, and hopefully he's not going to talk about how, serverless is going to replace our jobs. And it was like, it was a DevOps meetup. And for me, DevOps means like cloud native. It means like the developer writes the infrastructure and the CI/CD pipeline and the application code. But it was a whole room of people that were doing Chef and Puppet and EC2 instances and container management and Kubernetes. And so then it's like, here's this like kid talking about like Lambda functions and where's my Kubernetes, where's my Bash scripts, where's all of my Puppet, Chef. I remember I worked at a gigantic health insurance company for a little bit, and they had an issue around that. It was like, how do we update our servers when we had something happen maybe like 2016, 2017, where there was a security issue. I can't remember the exact name now, but it was like there's like 300 servers that they had, EC2 instances, and it was like, how do we patch this? And that was such a problem. We had a gigantic whiteboard, and we were going through all the different things that we could do, and we had this huge problem. It was like, we're spending $1 million a year on this AWS account. Nobody knows what these things do. It's all black boxes. How do we right size them? How do we figure out what's actually useful and then tweak it? And what you end up getting into the practice of is like, and this is where the big cost factor comes from as well, is that you right size for the peak capacity. And I'm totally ranting right now, but you end up right sizing for the peak capacity. So the EC2 instances, your database, everything is just at max. Because you're just trying to scale for that one moment when things will basically break and your users will go down. And I think once people get out of that habit, they kind of see this idea where it's like, they don't have to worry about all that stuff. And then there's this huge value to the business, because now the focus shifts away from trying to make sure that the wheels don't fall off to now trying to think about how do we optimize and build a better car and go faster. And then now all that, 60% of energy that was going towards this like low level infrastructure that has nothing to do with the core business goes away. And then now everybody's focused on how they can actually move forward and provide better experience for the customers. But change is hard. So, yeah.
I mean, that's bold, walking into New Relic's office circa 2018, talking about Lambda functions. I mean,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, they acquired, what was the name of the company? Erica
IOPipe.
IOPipe. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, they acquired a phenomenal troubleshooting, monitoring, and performance metrics tool called IOPipe. Integrated that into their main product offering. They're adopting, and my understanding is that they basically re-architected a lot of their underlying ingestion systems and subsystems to align more closely with like a cloud native, cloud first solution. But yeah, that's bold, walking in there and talking about that. I love it. Yeah, I would echo a lot of those comments as well, right? Like being able to offload the responsibilities of the shared security model, quote unquote, that Amazon offers, but basically every cloud service says is like, we'll patch the system, you worry about your app code, is generally how the contract goes. I think is hard to understate, like how much time that gets spent. And I don't remember exactly the incident you were speaking about, Ryan, but I posted in a comment. I was like, I remember Heartbleed. I remember how bad that was. 2018, the SSL, leaking bug. And I remember that as well. We were like, you've solved the problem on one machine, but you have infinite number of machines, and like that same experience of literally machine or AWS account discovery or whatever, any provider, right? Heroku or any other cloud server provider, trying to figure out what do we own? What are we paying for in our corporate, card that has to go out and get patched right now is just insane. And that cost is, it's not free. Certainly not. And to your other point about scaling to your peak, right? Like, where do you build your services? Where do you shore up the moats, right? You put them at high tide. Like, what's the max it goes to? And sometimes that tide is insane, and how much are you actually going to spend on it? So I think it's hard to quantify in a lot of procurement meetings or in other cost or budget meetings where you might be working with an organization that has a routine monthly, like, hey, we're going to buy reserved instances, or talk about how we can, move things to spot instances, and how much time we can invest in engineering to like stop using RIs or stop using just EC2 and switch to spot. And like, what is that actually going to cost us? And do we have to write a scheduler and all this other crap? And forgetting about that is something that somehow both engineering and management is also both bad at, where they just forget. Like, the engineers are like, oh yeah, I can solve this scheduling problem, no sweat. And management's like, well, the devs said they have to go out and figure out how to move more of our production traffic onto Spot. And that's going to cost 6 months to a question mark, which is always like 3 years. There's uncounted loss there that I think goes onto balance books of companies every single year. All right. Are there any other questions from the group here? We're sort of starting to wind down. I just want to make sure people get time to ask them if they have it. Josh or Ryan, who's been able to join us. If you have questions for Serverless Guru on cloud adoption or serverless adoption, driving that in your organization, tips, tricks, bat signals to throw up when you need help.
Yeah, I guess like impromptu, like if there is anybody listening and you do come across something where you're trying to build out a new use case, I definitely check out one of the links I sent in the chat. Was not actually, I didn't actually send it. Let me send it now. But it's templates.serverlessguru.com. And that should redirect to the GitHub URL. Oh, okay. AJ already sent it.
I added it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Because like, yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff at Serverless Guru, and we have a lot of teams working on serverless architecture. And one thing that we're always trying to do is think about generic ways that we can basically, we come across a use case. Maybe it's like, how do we handle Webpack, which Josh showed, or how do we handle building like Kafka, or how do we handle like deploying an Angular or Vue or React website and doing all the automation and infrastructure as code for it. So once we tackle those, we then create generic templates for it, and we keep it as like a living archive, publicly. So you can check those out. And then if there's any things that you want to see, like for instance, I think someone mentioned something earlier about a circuit breaker pattern. Those are all cool things that we may end up being like, yeah, we should definitely have a circuit breaker pattern. And if you did want to see something like that, we could put something together for it. So yeah.
I did page through a couple of those after AJ sent the link, and I saw the circuit breaker pattern one in there, among other things. So really appreciate it. It's awesome quality stuff there. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, cool.
Great. If there's not anything else, I want to wrap stuff up and say thanks for coming. Once more, next year, January, I think it's the 25th, did I say?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, January 25th. Yeah, Ali Spittle from the AWS Developer Advocate team talking about Amplify will be here. So join us. We're looking forward to that. If you haven't heard of Ali, she's a co-host of the Ladybug podcast. A lot of fantastic content to share. So that'll be January 25th. If you're looking to follow up with Josh or Ryan, you can find them at serverlessguru.com. You can also find them at Twitter by the same handle. We thank you guys so much for coming out and sharing your knowledge with us tonight. Very much appreciate it. Yeah, anything else to add?
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. This is super fun. I love talking with folks and everyone and everything like that. Thank you, Phil. I definitely appreciate your sincere appreciation as well. And then I think any other thing I'd also add is if you like these sort of chats and stuff, definitely check out Talking Serverless podcast. And if you can think of anyone who you think would be a good guest, or if you have an interesting thing that you've been either planning to use serverless for, or using serverless with, or new technology that you kind of want to show off, please hit me up or hit Ryan up. I'd love to interview you and just get some interesting information and the hottest takes. So yeah, that's all I got to say. Thank you, AJ and Serverless Minnesota, for this. Really appreciate the support and all that jazz.
Thanks for dialing in all the way from Portland. We appreciate it. Y'all stay safe, stay healthy out there. Take care, and we'll catch you all later. Bye, friends.
Catch you later,
bye,
y'all.
folks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you around.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.